The action unfolds in a demonic sect. An elder and sect leader named Gimo Genrin, whose name also means true devil, fought against several young guys in his sect's house. The old man was angry and shouted to his opponent that his palm technique of patience of unburied bones is so gentle that there is no murderous aura in it, and it even seems that usually this young man trains his technique only on chickens, ducks, tigers, and leopards. The elder also emphasized that there is no point in the fact that this young man lives and he must die. The man hit his opponent so hard in the face with his palm that he bled and fell to the ground. While doing this, the elder said that the ghostly step should be fast, as if the fighter himself was a ghost, but the man's steps were slower than the gait of the old man's long-dead grandmother. After that, the man again said that his opponent should die. He told the other guy that the fist of 7 kills would destroy him faster than the disciple himself would kill anyone, so he should also die. The elder's hands were covered in blood, and around him in large numbers lay the bodies of his opponents in pools of their own blood. The old man sighed with displeasure and said that he would not tolerate trash in his sect, and that's what happens when you don't train hard enough. At that moment, the old man announced that it was now Lu Lai's turn. The guy bowed and in fear, with a trembling voice, agreed with the head of the sect. It was the main character. Initially, he worked as a game developer, but he died while fixing bugs in the game and already got into this world with the system. A place where Taoist, Buddhist, and demonic are the 3 main sects. According to the scenario of the game, the main character was supposed to become a child of fate, but for some unknown reason he was thrown into a demonic sect. Not being strong enough, the player will be killed and will not even be able to escape, and even if he does, he will be chased to the death. In addition, this system, despite the fact that it can automatically cultivate any technique once learned, did not help the guy at all, but on the contrary irritated. She told the main character that his blood-eating technique was in a bad mood, as it did not absorb human blood, and that was why the main character's cultivation level had decreased. Also, the palm technique of tormenting unburied bones is not satisfied, since the guy kills only chickens and ducks, and the improvement progress is 0. The fist of 7 kills of the protagonist is very dissatisfied with his kind heart, so the cultivation level has also decreased. And the main character's ghost step technique doesn't have enough energy, since Lu Lai never merged with the souls of any ghosts or spirits, so the guy also didn't have any progress in cultivation. Seeing this, the guy was not happy at all and even angry. He understood that demonic teaching is either killing and drinking blood, or breaking bones and eating flesh, so the main character did not even know how such a thing could be practiced. The guy was sure that he would be killed. The elder grabbed the main character by the face and was displeased. The old man said that he handed over all 4 demonic techniques to the main character, and he, in turn, did not advance a bit. Then the head had a question about what the guy was doing all this time. The main character, out of fear, began to beg the teacher that he needed to be given another month, because he had already almost completely studied these techniques and would definitely satisfy the elders next time with his skills. The head of the sect angrily pushed the disciple away from him and sighed with displeasure, saying that if it were not for the exceptional talent of the main character, he would have skinned him and turned him into a ghoul. However, since the guy was the youngest, the old man decided to give him another month. When the tests were over and all the students stood up, the elder turned to them and said that they could learn even more from Zia Xiao, who in turn had already reached the highest level of the Scarlet Demon technique in the first month of her training. So in the future there would be a place for others in the inner disciples of the sect. The children thanked the teacher and worshipped him. After that, the man turned around and angrily told everyone to leave, also adding that he was not satisfied with this test, and if next month the students would still be like this, then they would all die. The guys worshipped again and told the elder that they would obey him. Getting up from the ground, the main character grabbed his heart and thought that he must definitely find a way to cultivate, otherwise this month will be his last. At that moment, one of the students approached the guy and enthusiastically asked him if he was really worried about his cultivation. After that, the girl came even closer to the main character, hugged him and asked if the guy wanted to come into her room and get some instructions from her. In fact, the girl's hints were pretty unambiguous and it was obvious that she invited the main character into the room not for that at all. The guy awkwardly waved the girl away and thanked her for her kindness, saying that he did not even dare to bother her about such a trifling matter. The girl also laughed awkwardly and said with a slice of disappointment that she had hurt him. After that, the main character turned around and decided that he would go to the pavilion in order to find new techniques, because he needed some other way of cultivation. The girl looked after the guy, folded her arms on her chest and sighed. After a while, the main character was sitting in the pavilion and rereading various scriptures, books, and scrolls. The guy found out that the lotus heart technique requires the bones of a living person, and for this reason it does not suit him. The demonic snake technique, which requires 100 pairs of human eyes, also did not suit the guy. The art of the demonic sword requires collecting yin and evil kai, as well as correcting it in the heart and lungs. This technique attracted the guy. He began to read into what was needed to improve it and learned that it would take him at least 50 years to succeed. The main character realized that this option did not suit him at all, since he would rather die than have time to finish practicing this technique. In the end, the guy decided that one can only say that this is really worthy of a demonic sect, because there is not a single technique that would not be so bloody, would not require the condensation of human blood and bones, and would not suck out ghostly kai. At that moment, a voice rang out in the pavilion. He said that everything the guy said was just ridiculous, because what kind of demonic sect is it then if it doesn't kill anyone and doesn't resurrect demons? At that moment, a strange glowing vortex formed in the room in which the guy was, and the voice came from there. At that moment, a big tall man with a beard and long hair appeared. He menacingly asked the main character if he was a spy of some enemy sect. The guy was terrified at that moment. He realized that this person was putting a lot of pressure on him and his cultivation was at least at the level of the Golden Dan. Lu Lai thought that this person might be the elder of the pavilion. After that, the main character got up from the floor, bowed and replied to the man that he wouldn't even dare to think about it and just wanted to find a technique that suits him. The guy also added that he was afraid that his teacher would kill him by the end of the month, and with his strength, he couldn't even be undercover at that time. There was some kind of thing like a pendant in the guy's hands. Apparently, this item carried information about the main character. When the man picked up this thing, he said that the guy in front of him was an external disciple of the demon. Then he turned his back and told the guy that he shouldn't rush his choice. The main character panicked and asked the elder to wait a minute. After that, Lu Lai's voice trembled and he said that he would dare to ask the old man if he had a suitable technique for him and if the man could provide it to him. The elder stopped, looked at the main character from behind and told him that the guy was a little cheeky. After that, the elder threw a couple of scrolls to Lu Lai and told him that these were his old techniques that he got from beating up 2 Yuanian practitioners. However, when leaving, the man added that it depends only on the main character whether he can practice it or not. The elder also added that he was tired and would go to bed, and the guy should also leave this place. The main character thanked the man from the bottom of his heart, but then he disappeared. After that, Lu Lai was very happy that he finally had some hope. After a while, the main character came to his room. He was sitting on the floor and studying the scrolls, and magic energy was spreading around him on the floor. When the main character read what he was given, he realized that he had received unusual scrolls. One of them was the Violet Dawn Sun Purification Mantra, an authentic flying temple technique that absorbs purple kai in the morning and golden haze in the evening. It also condenses the 5 elements of the true kai of the great sun, which shines and burns, but nothing can resist it. The second scroll was the Vajra technique. This is the divine technique of perfecting the body of the Vajra temple, which has 12 levels, and after cultivation, the physical body acquires invulnerability and boundless strength. Lu Lai knew that these were all righteous methods. However, the main character was also aware that he was in a demonic sect, and practicing righteous techniques could lead to his death. The Flying Temple is one of the 3 great Taoist temples in the world. The Vajra Temple, in turn, is one of 3,000 in the West, albeit with its defects, but the techniques of these schools are undoubtedly the best of the best. That's exactly what our main character thought. The guy knew that if the demonic sect found out that he was practicing the right techniques, then the sect members would decide that he was a spy sent by the righteous, and would kill him. However, if the guy does not practice these techniques, then his cultivation will still be at 0 and the elder will kill him. Lu Lai realized that he had fallen into a kind of trap, and that old man from the book depository decided to joke with him. At that moment, the system told the main character that the Purple Dawn Sun Purification Mantra and the Vajra technique had been found. She also asked the main character if he wanted to start studying. The guy decided that he was going to die anyway, so it would be better if he practiced. Therefore, the main character agreed with the system and began cultivation. Those golden scrolls were floating in the air around him, while the guy himself was sitting on the floor in the lotus position with his eyes closed and concentrating on what was happening. After that, the system announced that the study of the techniques was successful. Then 2 small men appeared in front of the main character. One of them was a beautiful girl, and the second was a young guy. the main character discovered them by opening his eyes. Lu Lai was glad that he had succeeded and decided that apparently he was really suitable for the cultivation of righteous techniques. At this moment, the guy who appeared in front of the main character folded his hands in front of him in a kind of bow and said Amitabha. Amitabha is one of the 3 forms of the Buddha, as well as one of the most common prayer lamentations among Buddhists. The main character knew this and concluded that this little monk is the Vajra technique, and the girl symbolizes the purple dawn. He caught himself thinking that compared to such a powerful description, they seem quite weak, so the guy was not sure that this was the effect. Then Lu Lai smiled, patted the girl on the head and said that it was already night and she could not feed the energy of the morning mist and the evening dawn, so she could rest. The girl also smiled and nodded in response. After a while, a large full moon appeared in the sky, as it was already the middle of the night. The main character at the same time was sitting on the floor opposite the Buddha, who was also sitting in the lotus position. Lu Lai was training his cultivation, so there was a peculiar aura of energy around him. Then the system told the guy that Vajra was satisfied with the firm will of the main character, so the effect of training increases by 50% and progress by 1%. The system also added that because of the guy's efforts in comprehending the technique, Vajra became even more satisfied, so now the effect of training increases by 80% and progress by 3%. Lu Lai was pleased with this. He opened his eyes, looked at his hands and enthusiastically said that this practice was really created for him. The guy also added that if everything continues to develop at such a pace, it will not take 20 days before he will be able to break through to the next level. Suddenly Lu Lai noticed that the little Buddha had fallen to the floor and fallen asleep. The system told the guy that his Vajra was depressed because he hadn't heard the sutras for too long, so he decided to stop practicing for 1 day. Then the main character laughed awkwardly and said that it would be too easy. After that, the guy thought that fortunately, he just wanted to listen to the sutra when he was fixing bugs in the game and he was brought here. So the fact that he remembered the text of the Heart Sutra to try on emotions turned out to be more useful than ever. After that, the main character began to read the mantra aloud. Bunda heard her and woke up. The boy opened his eyes and found that the main character, who was sitting opposite him, continued to recite the mantra. This caused the Buddha to admire. At that moment, in the temple of the Buddha, the head heard the prayers. He was interested in what kind of person prays for the chant. Then one of the subjects approached the man and turned to His Holiness to ask him about what had disturbed him so much. The man replied that while chanting the sutra, he heard a distant sound like thunder and now he is afraid that it was a bodhisattva and the highest sutra descending into the world. In response to this, the subject said that this was good news, and he did not understand what then frightened the man. His Holiness said that unfortunately, the one who reads the sutra is in the south, on the mountain of 10,000 demons. Hearing this, I was surprised. Then the man ordered everyone to contact the Taoists to prepare for an attack on the demonic sect, and he ordered the followers of Buddhism to send 10,000 demons to the mountains in search of bodhisattvas and scriptures, because they should not be allowed to fall into the hands of the sect. Everyone under the data heard the order and began to carry it out. At this time, a girl, one of the disciples of the sect, was swimming in a mountain lake. Her name was Lin Jianshan. She heard the order that all the disciples of the Buddha need to go to the mountains of 10,000 demons and therefore moved out on the road. After the main character finished reciting the sutra, he opened his eyes and looked around. The system told the guy that by listening to his sutra, Vajra gained insight and entered a state of enlightenment, so progress increased by 4%. The system congratulated the guy on the breakthrough of the Vajra technique to a new level. Also, as a result of listening to the main character's sutra, the Vajra technique was transformed into the indestructible divine Vajra skill. The main character was surprised by this. He saw that the little one was sitting in front of him in the lotus position and was still continuing to cultivate. The guy was also glad that the technique had evolved, because he felt his strength had also become greater. Then Lu Lai began to think about what you would tell him to test his new strength. At that moment, a stone table caught his eye and the main character decided that this was the very thing to test his new strength. Then the guy hit the table with his fist from top to bottom. As a result, the table shattered into small pieces of stone and the main character was very pleased. He realized that now his strength has become 10 times more and besides, with such a blow, his arm does not even hurt. Then he realized that the indestructible blow of the Vajra is really so strong and now Lu Lai is ready for battle. After that, the main character decided to leave his room on the balcony. Once outside, he found that it was already morning. The guy caught himself thinking that he didn't even think that the practice would take the whole night. At this moment, the system informed the main character that purple absorbs the brilliance of the sun and the sky in vain, and also feels joy, so the effect of training increases by 50% and progress by 1. At that moment, Lu Lai turned around and saw that a girl had entered the balcony. He asked her if the effect of the technique would be better if the area of interaction became larger. The girl nodded approvingly. Then the system reported that the Purple Dawn Sun Purification Mantra was satisfied with checking the main character's physical body, so now he can speed up the practice and increase the effect of it by 150%. This happened because the main character took off his clothes, leaving only his pants. The guy sat with the girl on the veranda and cultivated. He was thinking that it was a very cool idea to take off clothes to increase the area of interaction. The girl sat with her eyes closed in the lotus position and smiled approvingly. Then the system reported that since the main character is in contact with the brilliance of the sun and the sky with all his heart and soul, the purple one is full of energy and vain, so the effect of cultivation is again increased by 100%. At this time, a sign similar to a colored fire tattoo appeared on the main character's hand. Lu Lai felt it appear on his hand, looked at it and asked in surprise what it was. In response to this, the girl said that it was a sign of dedication. She congratulated the guy on becoming a real disciple of the Flying Temple, and after a while, he will be able to create the true Kai of the sun and the heavens of the 5 elements. These words confused the main character, and he said that he could not become a real student because he did not belong to the Flying Temple school. Looking at this, the girl smiled and said that starting the practice of the teaching transmitted to her, the guy is already considered a true follower of their school. Then Lu Lai panicked and told the girl about whether she could have told him about it earlier. The girl awkwardly looked at the guy and said that he had not asked her about it. The guy was scared and began to think that the master of the demonic sect sees through the ways of cultivation. If the Vajra technique only hardens the body, and she is widespread, then the techniques of the Flying Temple are another matter. The main character began to wonder if he was dripping his own grave. He decided that if he could develop and take away this true Kai, then everything would be over and he had to find a way to suppress it. Since cultivation requires the use of the essence of the sun and the heavens, it will certainly reject negative Kai. At that moment, it dawned on the guy that he could go to the cave of 10,000 spirits. Once there, the main character once again made sure that this place really justifies its name, because there are graves everywhere and a frosty cold is felt without the slightest breath of wind. The girl was walking along with Lu Lai, and there was fear on her face. The system reported that due to the absorption of dark energy, the purple dawn of the guy feels discomfort, so the effect of cultivation is reduced by 200%. The main character smiled maliciously and was glad that his idea really worked, while the girl was crying, pointing her finger at the guy and saying that he was bad, and then disappeared altogether. Lu Lai wasn't too surprised by this. The guy continued to walk further into the forest and thought about why he still hadn't seen a single ghost. If this place is called the Cave of 10,000 Spirits, the main character began to look around, knock on trees and monuments, asking if anyone was at home. At this time, the guy heard a voice from his back. It was a girl who was floating in the air, sitting on a magic staff. She had green hair and 2 pigtails. The girl laughed and told the main character that he was really interesting. Hearing this, the guy instantly tensed up and turned in the direction of the sound. The main character shouted asking about who is here. At that moment, the girl touched her staff, jumped off it to the ground and walked towards the guy. The girl introduced herself to him, saying that her name was Liu He and she was a student of the Demon Cave on patrol. The girl suggested that the main character is a new disciple of the Demon Lord and added that the guy looks like he first came to this place. Then the girl came very close to the main character, took his chin, smiled and asked if he wanted to listen to her story about the local rules. The guy was embarrassed by how close the girl came to him, so when he started talking, he also began to stutter there. The main character told the girl that they should still talk about the rules. Then the girl said that they had agreed and began her story. Liu He said that this is the outer part of the Cave of 10,000 Spirits. The ghosts have almost disappeared here, so if the guy wants to find them, then he needs to go to the inner part. The girl took out a map and said that it showed a detailed description of the places where they spread for just 5 lower-class spiritual stones. Hearing such a price, the guy was seriously surprised. However, then he smiled slyly and told the girl what would happen if he did not buy the card. However, in the very next second, the girl drew her sword and put it to the throat of the main character. The guy got scared, fell to his knees and handed her 5 green spiritual stones. He asked the girl to take them. She smiled in response and said that she would do as the guy wished. After she took it away, the girl gave the main character the card and said that he should not be upset in the future if he got into trouble, because then it would be enough for him to just get this card. call her name and the guy would be safe. After that, the girl added that, on top of everything else, the guy really took a look at her and she considers him handsome, so he should not refuse her warning. In the next second, he said that the demon lord would only accept one disciple and she really hoped that they would meet next month. After that, the girl said goodbye to the guy, calling him handsome brother, and flew away. The main character looked after her and thought about whether she wanted to scare him or said it really seriously. Despite this, Lai realized that he was not familiar with this area, so it was not superfluous to buy a map. Finally looking at the map, the main character was very disappointed, because in fact, she was not as good as they said the girl. The guy was indignant and said that this was not a detailed description at all and he would file a complaint where necessary. However, after that, the main character sighed wearily and said that apparently this he is really very strong, since he is responsible for this territory, so it's better for the guy not to mess with her, but to find a place for cultivation as soon as possible. After a while, Lai found a suitable place in the depths of the forest, sat down on the ground in the lotus position and began to cultivate. Around him at this time, a kind of dome of golden-colored energy was formed. When the guy opened his eyes, he found an alert from the system that his mantra of purifying the violet dawn sun was not satisfied with the negative energy around and was worried to the point of losing touch with reality, so cultivation regresses. Seeing this, the main character was delighted that progress had already dropped by 36%. And in a few days this righteous flying temple technique would finally drop to 0. At the same time, the system notified the main character that his progress increased by 1%, since his Vajra listens to the sutra of the main character, and realized its truths a little. Then Lai realized that the indestructible divine Vajra skill had only risen by 1% in 3 hours and it was very slow for him. Suddenly, the main character heard a sound and abruptly turned in his direction and asked about who was nearby. However, finding no one, the guy was a little scared and thought that this place is very creepy. He should not expect anything good from him. The guy did not have time to finish, as a huge monster appeared in front. He shouted that he felt the blood of a living person and it smells very tasty. Lai was scared, screamed and couldn't figure out what kind of monster was in front of him. However, the next second he stopped and thought about the fact that now he is a practitioner and disciple of the demonic sect, and now some spirit cannot scare him. Then the main character smiled slyly and decided that now was the time for him to practice his new skills. However, Lai was not quick enough and in the next second, the monster had already bitten his head. At first, the guy was scared. Well, why did he realize that he didn't feel anything at all? It didn't hurt him. The monster was also surprised and could not understand what was happening. Then he opened his mouth, started screaming and coughing, because smoke was coming out of his mouth. Only at this moment the main character was able to look at his body, and noticed that it glows with a golden color, forming a kind of barrier. Lai was delighted and realized that the indestructible Vajra skill had worked, and since the main character is now practicing the positive yang technique, these evil monsters can't stand this energy that is concentrated in his body. What happened angered the monster, so he shouted that he would kill the main character, calling him a bastard. In response to this, the guy stood up and told his opponent that he could catch him if he could. The next second, the main character at high speed, simultaneously dodging the monster's blows, ran further and further away from him. At the same time, his eyes were closed and it seemed that he did everything with great ease. Why the guy stopped abruptly and struck a strong blow to his opponent. As a result, it turned out to be crushing and the monster died. Then the system notified the guy that because of the ghostly energy that entered his body, the mantra of purifying the violet dawn sun had completely gone crazy and cultivation was regressing. However, the protagonist's devilish ghost step and fueled pure spirit energy and became more vigorous, increasing the cultivation effect by 50%. In addition, the palm technique of tormenting the unburied bones of the protagonist is glad to kill the enemy, so its effect from cultivation also increases by 50%. Seeing this, Lai was delighted and wondered if he would be able to pass the test at the end of the month if he raised his level by fighting monsters. At that moment, the main character heard another monster hiding behind a tree not far from him. The guy laughed angrily and ran in his direction, while the monster began to run away from the main character and shout that he did not approach him. As a result, Lai ran to the lake and could not catch up with the monster as he managed to escape quickly. After looking into the hot spring, the main character discovered that the same disciple of his sect, who invited him to visit her, was bathing naked in it. The girl smiled slyly and greeted the guy and said that she did not expect to meet him here at all. Then the girl got up from the water, showing her completely naked body and heading closer to the main character, asked him if he had also come to swim. The girl turned to Lulai saying that this pond is pretty cold and suitable for them to practice demonic techniques. For this reason, she invited the guy to go down and swim with her. At this time, the girl was still standing completely naked in front of the main character. He, in turn, turned away, took his gaze as far away from the sect disciple as possible and replied to her that he was very grateful for such an invitation. But he still had things to do, so he had to leave Sister Zio. Then the girl's patience broke and she began to run into the main character with discontent. Zio asked him about why the guy was avoiding her, because she hadn't really done anything to him and hadn't offended him in any way. In response, the main character began to wave his hand awkwardly and said that the girl was right and she really hadn't done anything wrong to him. It was just that Sister Zio was too worried and now they were rivals, after all, so they had better avoid unnecessary suspicions. After these words, Lulai turned around and headed towards the forest, away from the pond. The guy was thinking that no one knows what is in the head of the demon's disciple and he would not like to get into the prasak. After the guy, the girl shouted his name, trying to stop him. But everything was unsuccessful. As a result, the girl only looked after him with discontent and disappointment and thought that she was very bored and it looked like she would have to wait for another prey. At this time, behind a stone that was on the shore of the lake, the dried body of a once living young man lay and it became clear that all this was really a trap. 20 days later, Lulai was still at his favorite spot in the forest. The guy was sitting on the ground and cultivating. Several monsters that looked like young girls gathered around him. They approached him from all sides, as they were attracted by the scent of blood and flesh of a living person. However, when the monsters tried to attack the main character or somehow get closer to him, they were immediately repelled by the protective barrier that appeared in the guy thanks to cultivation. This barrier was getting stronger every day, and in the end, the main character was almost at the level of Elder Buddha. Lulai had absolutely no difficulty attacking monsters without even moving from the spot. After that, the main character glanced angrily in the direction of the monsters and asked them if they were really looking for death, since they decided to attack stealthily. After that, the guy started hitting the girls again, this time using his palms. Lulai's technique was so good that the beam of energy that came out of his hand burned monsters through. In the end, killing the last monster, the guy began to recite a mantra. It said that the emptiness of all dharmas is their essential sign and they are not born. They do not disappear, they are not dirty, but they are not clean, they do not grow and they do not kill. On the last monster, which was about to run away from the main character, Lulai used a blow called the Wheel of Samsara and killed him. The other monsters that were watching this, hiding behind the trees, were in fear and were afraid to even move. However, the main character still knew that they were standing there and therefore cunningly and angrily laughed and said that he would definitely get to them. In the next second, the guy rushed after the crowd of monsters that were running away from him in fear as fast as they could. After a while, the main character sat down on the ground in the shade of a tree. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and thought that he was tired to death. He also realized that he had dealt with everyone in this area, and chasing them was very troublesome. At that moment, a system notification appeared in front of the guy saying that his devil ghost step was satisfied with absorbing a large amount of ghost energy, so his progress increased by 5%. In this regard, this skill of the main character has increased to the 4th level. The system also reported that since the main character had killed enough creatures within a few days, his progress in the palm technique of tormenting unburied bones increased by 10%. Thus, this technique of Lulai has also reached the 4th level. Seeing this, the main character was very happy and decided that he had done a good job, because apparently the level of these techniques is growing as it should. At the same time, the mantra of purifying the violet dawn sun has already regressed to 0 and now even the gods cannot detect it. However, the Vajra technique has stalled on the breakthrough, as due to the lack of spiritual and physical strength, this skill cannot break through to the next level. The guy was still at the 1st level of Kai cultivation. However, the fact that all the techniques have grown so much in a month would definitely raise suspicions about the main character. So the guy decided that if he gets stuck on the 3rd level, then it's not so bad at the moment. At this time, a voice came from the main building of the demonic sect that the time for the competition had come and the participants should hurry up. Lulai got up from the ground and rejoiced that he had finally heard the order of the demon lord. After that, the guy at high speed, jumping through the trees, went towards the sect. When he disappeared, 2 people appeared in his place in the forest, a girl and a tall man. The woman told her friend that if this kid does not run away, she is afraid that the demonic energy will not leave a piece of him. However, in response to this, the man replied with irritation that Mama's sons have no place in their sect. He also added that it's just a matter of killing a few evil spirits. However, this boy says he is Amitabha Buddha and is more ruthless than anyone else. All this made the man think about whose student this guy is. In response to this, the girl said that this guy is a disciple of the Demon Lord. This information shocked the man. He couldn't understand how this old devil could have a disciple with such high qualifications. However, he added that if it wasn't for the fact that this old man would soon break through to the Union stage, then he would have taken this guy as a disciple. Then the girl smiled slyly and replied that she was really sorry that this guy could not be a student and her friend, but he could be her husband. Two people entered the temple of the Demon Lord, Lu Lai and Xiao. They knelt down on one knee and, folding their hands in a certain gesture, greeted their master. The elder was sitting on the throne at that time. When he realized that these two were the only ones left alive, he said that everyone else was just a bunch of losers. This fact caused irritation in the old man. The elder turned to Xiao and said that her demonic Kai-devouring blood is very strong and must have absorbed the life force of 10 cultivators, and these few offended souls were at least at the 8th level of Kai cultivation during their lifetime. Hearing this, the girl smiled, as she was proud of herself. The elder continued to speak and said that with the 5th level of Kai cultivation that the girl possesses, it is very worthy to kill an opponent of the 8th level. Hearing such words, the girl beamed with happiness and even more and thanked the master for the praise. Then the elder turned to Lu Lai and said that the guy also did a good job, because in just 1 month he really improved the techniques that the master taught him and did not disappoint his expectations. In response to this, the main character also thanked the elder. However, the girl was not happy to hear such words and looked at the guy with envy. At this time, the old man added that he was at a turning point in his cultivation and therefore did not yet have enough strength to recruit disciples. Then the master said that in a month he would test their skills again. The best of them would be accepted into the ranks of true disciples. Like everything else, the old man said that this time he would be in seclusion, so the guys should be more careful, because the master then does not want to collect their corpses and avenge the guys if they die. Hearing these words, the main character tensed slightly and thought about what the master was hinting at. After that, the old man announced that he had finished his speech and ordered the guys to leave. The master himself turned into a cloud of black energy and flew out of the temple. Xiao pulled on the mask of a sweet and innocent girl again and approached Lu Lai. The girl told the main character that he was amazing, because he passed the test, being only at the 1st level of Kai improvement. She also suggested that the guy probably already mastered his techniques masterfully, and asked him how he managed it. Lu Lai awkwardly scratched his head, shrugged and said that he was just lucky. After that, the guy hurried to leave the temple. Then the girl grabbed the main character by the shoulder and told him in a sweet voice to stop being so nervous. However, this only caused irritation, so when the guy turned back to the girl, he rudely asked her what else she needed. At that moment, Xiao stabbed the knife right into the heart of the protagonist. She whispered in his ear that if the guy did not fall into her trap, then she would deal with him with her bare hands. Suddenly the girl realized that the guy was dissolving in her hands. Xiao was horrified to discover that it was only the ghostly shadow of the protagonist, and not himself. The girl was very surprised and said that such a vision is possible only when the skill step of the devil ghost is at the 4th level. She couldn't understand how this was possible. In response to this, the main character calmly replied that he did not understand what the girl was talking about. He asked her how she dared to stab him and maim other students. The guy suggested that the girl is not afraid of her master's anger at all. Xiao still didn't understand where the guy was, so she answered him somewhere to the side. The girl said that Brother Lu apparently did not hear the words of the master well, because he said that if they died, he would not avenge them. That is, it is implied that if the girl kills Lu Lai, then she will become a true disciple of the Demon Lord. In response to this, the main character laughed and asked the girl if she really thought she could kill him. In response to this, the girl attacked the guy at the same second and asked him if he really relies on his 1st level. The main character was able to easily repel the girl's attack and replied that she was right. Xiao was horrified by what was happening, as she could not understand why she could not tear Lu Lai's flesh. Then she turned to him and said that she had underestimated the guy and he was a really capable student, so she could not hold back. After that, Xiao pulled out the talisman and asked the main character about the strength of the evil spirit that is sealed inside this talisman. Lu Lai was surprised, because it was obvious that the girl went with the trumps. Therefore, the very next second, the main character was near her. Xiao was scared because she didn't expect the guy to move so fast. The girl didn't even have time to do anything, while the main character put some kind of sign on her chest. While doing this, he asked Zio about whether she still thinks that he will not be able to do it. When the girl looked at her body and at first did not even understand what it was, but why did she feel that the guy had sealed her magical power, or to be more precise, frozen it? After that, Lulai spoke up and said that it was the ice demon grass, which is a very strong poison. He can freeze not only the magical power of a girl, but also her body, and the more she resists, the faster the poison will take effect. Zio really couldn't move and was very scared. However, soon, her fright turned into anger and annoyance, and she asked Lulai about how long he had been planning this. The guy just smiled and replied that it was quite natural that the girl should be treated with caution, because in the end, other students could not attend the temple. The main character suggested that this happened because the girl had played enough to take off to death. In response to this, Zio said that the guy shouldn't think that she can't do anything. After that, the girl cut her finger with a blade, picked up the talisman and put it in front of her. Zio shouted that the blood offering should help her, and even if she loses most of her strength, she still intends to destroy her opponent. After that, a huge demon monster appeared behind the girl. Zio smiled viciously, looked at the main character and said that it was a spirit that she was able to catch in the cave of 10,000 ghosts. Initially, he was only at the 3rd level of Kai cultivation. However, after the girl fed him human blood, he was able to reach the 10th level. After telling Lulai about this, the girl again asked the guy if he was still confident of his victory. Zio used a gesture to order the spirit to attack the main character. He was several dozen times bigger and stronger than Lulai. The guy looked at him with fright and thought that he was in trouble. Then he told the spirit that he looked familiar and asked if they had met before. The spirit was surprised, recoiled back, and sweat broke out on his face. Once the guy remembered that this is the same monster that escaped from him in the forest a month ago. The main character said this to the spirit and then immediately shrank and trembled. Zio was also a little scared, but rather surprised, and asked the monster about why he was suddenly afraid of Lulai. However, in response to this, the spirit only cried and fled from this place in fear. The guy exhaled with boredom and said that the monster had run away from him again and it wasn't interesting at all. This time, Zio was even more scared than before, because she realized that even ghosts were afraid of her opponent. She asked the main character about what he had done. In response, the guy just smiled, shrugged, and said that he hadn't really done anything like that. He was just familiar with all the evil spirits in the neighborhood, and added that it was better for the girl to worry about herself now. He reminded her that shrouded in the icy demonic grass, without the strength to defend herself, she would not be able to hold out for too long. Zio looked at her feet and saw that her body was already half wrapped in ice. Then she started crying and begging the guy to let her go, promising that she would do anything for him. At this time, the ice had already reached the girl's face, but she continued to scream and beg the main character to let her go. Lulai only looked at her with indifference and calmly replied that he was sorry, but he could not help. In response to this, the girl screamed shrilly, but then the ice completely enveloped her and she turned into a kind of statue. After a few seconds, the statue evaporated and only small pieces of ice remained from it. The main character exhaled with relief and said that the girl deserved it. At this moment, an alert from the system appeared in front. It said that since the main character killed an adept of the sect in the first, his skill Palm of Torment of Unburied Bones was strengthened by 300%, and progress increased by 10. The guy was surprised by such a promotion and was glad. However, at this moment, a voice came from behind. It was an elder. He also said that the girl deserved her death and added that Lulai did a good job. The guy immediately turned around to face the master, got down on one knee and bowed. He began to justify himself by saying that he was not worthy of the master's praise. In response, the man only smiled and said that the physical strength of the guy, and besides his techniques of the Palm of the Torment of Unburied Bones and the Step of the Devil Ghost, broke through to the 4th level, and it took less than a month. The elders added that he is amazed by the abilities of the main character. He is even ashamed of his words. However, he narrowed his eyes and asked Lulai about how his training was going. The guy trembled and thought that, as expected, the man had revealed his cultivation, because apparently it could not be hidden. Then the main character bowed again and, putting 2 scrolls in front of him, said that the reason why he had perfected his physical body was to practice the Buddhist Vajra technique. The master immediately grabbed the scrolls and began to read them. After a few seconds, he was convinced that this was indeed the same technique. He also found in the second scroll the mantra of purifying the violet dawn sun of the flying temple, which was a true Taoist scripture. The man was surprised to ask the main character about who gave him these scrolls. The main character replied that these scrolls were given to him by a gray-haired elder with a necklace of human skulls. The guy also added that he himself did not expect that he would master this Buddhist technique of perfecting the body with divine speed. Hearing the word divine, something flashed in the master's eyes. He got angry and forcibly pulled Lu Lai to him, releasing magic from his palm. In the end, when the guy finally approached the elder, he grabbed him by the throat and began to peer into the eyes of the main character. The man asked the guy if it could be that he is the reincarnation of a bodhisattva, about which there are conversations going on around. From what he heard, the guy was very scared and decided that he was hit, although he didn't really understand what the demon lord was talking about. The elder was still holding the protagonist by the throat and was very angry. The guy was so scared that beads of sweat appeared on his face. He asked the demon lord what he meant and what he was talking about. Then the man told Lu Lai to stop pretending I was a fool and now he would check everything for sure. Suddenly, a small golden bowl appeared in the master's hands. He pointed it at the main character and bright light poured out of the dishes. He hit Lu Lai's eyes so hard that his head hurt, and the guy could barely open them again. After nothing happened to the main character, the elder looked at him in surprise and was convinced that he was really wrong. Then the man released the guy so that he fell to the floor. The master calmly said that he was so happy thinking that Lu Lai really is the reincarnation of the Buddha's son. The man added that since the elder gave the scrolls to him, the guy should keep them. Lu Lai, at that moment, was relieved to think that fortunately everything was fine with him, and after all, he had already decided for a second that there were some problems with cultivation. Then, the elder sat on his throne and, turning to the guy, said that he had a reserved character, and the main character hides his talent, but this is not exactly what the master needs. However, the man also added that the natural data of the protagonist is quite good, as well as intelligence and skill, so for now, the demon lord has decided that he will take Lu Lai as his true disciple. Then the master said that the guy should go to the mountain peak in order to choose a place for himself in the palace of the Celestials. The main character bowed again, dropping to one knee and said that he paid his respects to the master. In response, he heard that the demon lord was counting on him. Suddenly, the old man added that he is not a miser either, and now that Lu Lai has become his true disciple, the man is going to teach him the technique of devouring blood and absorbing heaven. While saying this, the elder used magic to transfer this technique to his new student, and the system notified the guy that the skills had been successfully obtained. Then a figure of a green malachite tower appeared in the master's hand. The elder said that in the past it was used for ritual sacrifices, and with its help you can subdue spirits, or keep them for further battles with enemies. In addition, in a fully activated state, this thing weighs about 15,000 kilograms, and therefore can also be used as a hidden weapon. Then the master handed this tower to the main character and ordered him to take care of this thing properly. Lu Lai was surprised to say the least, because he understood perfectly well that a magic weapon of this quality costs at least 5,000 lower class magic stones, and giving such a thing to a guy for free was very generous on the part of the demon lord. Therefore, the guy bowed again and thanked the master from the bottom of his heart, wished him eternal happiness and longevity. In response to this, the old man just waved his hand and ordered the main character to start his training. And if he does not understand something, he can ask his brothers and sisters. The elder also added that if the guy chooses the mountain abode of the Celestials, then they themselves should visit him as soon as they hear a rustle. Lu Lai smiled and asked the master to let him take his leave in that case. The main character was very happy that now he finally passed the first level. After a while, he found himself in the mountains on the roof of one of the palaces. The guy was sitting in the lotus position and trying to read the energy of this place. After a few seconds, he was able to conclude that this palace is not very full of spiritual energy, as he would like, but the situation in it is really quite favorable. Lu Lai became convinced that the place where true disciples live is really different from other places he has visited. After that, the main character turned to the system and told her that he wanted to familiarize himself with the technique of devouring blood and absorbing heaven. Then a system window appeared in front of the guy, which said that this technique is an advanced version of the blood-devouring demon technique, after cultivating which, the light of the blood-devouring demon will appear, capable in turn of devouring the Kai of the sun, heaven, and the 5 elements. However, the system added that if a guy wants to cultivate faster, then he should absorb spiritual blood. Preferably it should be the blood of a powerful cultivator or evil spirits. When Lu Lai reaches the depth of his cultivation, there will be nothing left that he cannot absorb. From what he heard, the main character felt uneasy because it turned out that the technique that the master kindly provided him requires devouring human blood, and the guy didn't like it at all. Lu Lai was well aware that such a practice would eventually lead to dependence on blood, as befits a demonic technique, but apparently it does not suit the main character at all. However, Lu Lai suddenly noticed that in addition to blood, one can also absorb spiritual energy. Then the guy activated the mantra of purifying the violet dawn sun and a girl appeared in front of him again. Since at that time the guy was sitting on the roof and the sun was shining on him, the cultivation was successful. Therefore, the system notified him that the purple dawn is full of energy, and the effect of cultivation increases by 10% again, and progress by 1. The guy smiled slyly and said that it was great, and now he was activating blood devouring and heaven devouring. Thus, he decided to absorb the energy of the violet dawn. The girl was scared, because she did not expect such a development of events. At that moment, a vampire appeared from the purple energy that came from inside the guy and bit into the girl's neck. After he finished, there was an alert from the system that his blood-devouring and heaven-absorbing technique was satisfied with absorbing the true Kai of the 5 elements of the sun and heaven. Therefore, the effect of cultivation increased by 10% and the progress again by 1. Lu Lai was happy with this result because it meant that he did not need to absorb human blood at all in order to practice this technique. The main character decided that there was nothing more to be done because he needed to train somehow. Suddenly Luoi heard a rumble. Something fell from the sky to the ground right in front of the palace. It turned out it was some guy cultivator. He smiled and looked at the main character. He then told Lu Lai that his name was Beijing Fei and he was the 8th elder brother. He also added that he would like to make friends with the main character. Hearing this, the guy was a little surprised as he realized that he now has 8 brothers in total. I wondered if Lu Lai wanted to make friends with this guy, because I had heard that his students were far from weaklings. After a while, the main character descended from the roof and walked towards Fei. Lu Lai smiled and greeted the cultivator. He also apologized for not doing it earlier and added that he had just arrived, and his room was still empty, and therefore he could not receive the guests properly. In response, Beijing laughed and said that they were all here as a matter of course and they did not need these formalities at all. The guy also added that he had already guessed that the 5th brother took all his things before leaving and left nothing. Lu Lai asked about the 5th brother. Then Fei said that the previous owner of this tower unfortunately died, and in total the master accepted 13 students. However, only the 1st brother, the 2nd sister, the 3rd brother, the 6th sister and Beijing Fei himself are left now. The others were either already dead or missing. From such news, the main character was a little scared, because he decided that it was very dangerous to be a demon's disciple. He also remembered that there were still 2 people in the sect, so he should be on his guard. Fei came closer to the main character, grabbed him by the shoulder and said that at the moment he and his 2nd sister and Lu Lai himself were inside the sect. After that, Fei abruptly put his arm around the main character's neck, pulled him to him and asked the guy if everything was fine with his money now. Beijing suggested that Lu Lai doesn't have a lot of them now, since cultivation requires a lot of spiritual stones, so the brother said that if anything happens, the main character can turn to him for help and he will lend him the stones without interest. The main character was a little taken aback and asked his new friend about what he owed him such generosity. Fei replied that they were taking over now and therefore he could not demand anything from Lu Lai, and he just needed to write a receipt. However, when the guy said this, his voice became more serious. Then Beijing turned completely gloomy and said that if Lu Lai couldn't pay or something happened to him, then Fei would just take all his treasures. The guy also added that he could not only help the main character with money, but also help with the girls if he needed it. Lu Lai felt awkward and a little scared. He backed away and told his new brother that he appreciated his kindness. But for now he didn't need all this. To himself, the main character thought with irritation that he had found a speculator. Suddenly, Fei recoiled from the guy and asked him with horror about why, at the age of 18, being in the prime of his life, he did not want a girl for himself. Beijing assumed that Lu Lai liked guys and was even more scared. In response to this, the main character smiled and said that his brother did not understand him at all and said in a firm voice that he was just an ordinary hero. However, Beijing Fei heard the guy wrong and decided that he said grass thickets. As a result, Fei decided that Lu Lai is a snake demon who is able to take human form, and this is at least a gold level demon and he can't do that. Because of this, Fei was seriously scared. Lu Lai wanted to tell him that he meant something completely different, but Beijing no longer heard him. Then the main character realized that this guy has only women on his mind. After all that had happened, Beijing felt uncomfortable and decided to leave the newcomer alone. The guy finally told Lu Lai that since he had such peculiar hobbies, he would not ask him any more questions, and if the main character needed something, he could safely contact him. Since Lu Lai had just moved in, Fei was sure that he still had a lot of work to do, so he decided not to distract the guy anymore. The main character thanked his brother and also said goodbye to him, wishing him good luck. After that, Fei rose into the sky with great speed and disappeared as abruptly as he appeared. Lu Lai just breathed out a sigh of relief and was glad that this guy had finally left. Also, the main character thought that most likely, the rest of the inhabitants of the tower are not sitting idle here, which means it's time for him to start cultivating too. Suddenly the guy heard a sound. It was a system alert that said that his blood-devouring and heaven-absorbing technique had developed an appetite, and because she didn't have the opportunity to eat properly, she was forced to go in search of negative Kai in the cave of 10,000 ghosts alone. Thus, the cultivation progress of the main character increased by 5%. Lu Lai was very surprised by this, because he did not even know that the technique could take and run away by itself as soon as he mentioned cultivation. The system then notified the protagonist that his blood-devouring and heaven-absorbing technique had found 10,000 signs of a lower astral spirit in the cave. At this time, the technique, in the form of a small vampire, hid behind a tree and was ready to attack the spirit. The system told Lu Lai that the location of is located 360 kilometers southeast of the Valley of 3 Stars, near a 2-meter tree of raked souls. The main character was happy about this, because astral spirits are ghosts who were accidentally born with spiritual intelligence, and they are quite rare. The guy also knew that one such spirit is worth at least 10,000 lower-class spiritual stones, and if he manages to catch it, it will be more than enough for cultivation resources for a whole month. However, it was too risky for the guy to go out right now, because it's possible that someone is still watching him. For this reason, the main character decided to stay late. There was also something else in the cave of 10,000 ghosts that the guy should be wary of. After a while, the main character came to his usual place in the forest near the cave, sat down on the ground and began to cultivate. At that moment, the same sister Liu He who sold the card to the guy came to him. Apparently, it was for her that the main character came to this place. The girl flew up to Lu, made sure that it was really him and said hello. The guy bowed and greeted his sister, but the girl told him that he should no longer bow to her, because now that he has become a true disciple of the sect of spirits of the underworld, he and Liu He have become on the same level. After that, the girl lowered to the ground and handed the guy the same 5 lower-class spiritual stones that he gave her for the card a month ago. She explained this by saying that Beijing Fei is her man, and Lu Lai is his brother, which means that he is now also her man so she will not charge him with spiritual stones. Hearing this, the guy was surprised and realized that this girl Liu He occupies a certain niche in the cave of 10,000 ghosts, and most likely even one of the highest positions among other sisters in the sect of spirits of the underworld, but wants to return the guy his spiritual stones. This prompted the main character to think that the girl just wants to win his trust. When Liu He saw the confusion on the guy's face, she was a little offended, because she decided that he thought she put poison in the stones. Lu Lai was afraid of his sister's reaction and quickly changed his displeased face to a wide smile, accepted the stones from the girl's hands and thanked her. Then Liu He smiled and said that after all, the guy passed the test of the Great Demon, which means he can be considered an outstanding student, so the girl has hopes for him. After that, the girl laughed and said that the guy was still behaving strangely, because it was his first day of joining the sect. But he didn't even want to have a little fun at all, but on the contrary, he came to the cave to practice. Liu He realized that the main character does not take perseverance. The girl even added that she was already aware that the guy refused even the beauties that Beijing Fei offered. This story made the girl laugh and she did not hold back. However, when she heard Lu Lai's answer, but her expression changed dramatically, because the guy said that as soon as he saw his sister, he immediately realized that all the other women for him were nothing more than ordinary girls. Liu He asked the main character if he was telling the truth and then came closer to him. The girl hugged him and said that since he said so, she would believe him. Lu Lai did not expect such a quick reaction from his sister and was even taken aback. The main character hugged the girl with one hand, and a purple light appeared in his eyes. He smiled and asked his sister if she still wanted to take it more seriously. Then the girl abruptly recoiled from Lu Lai. Her expression changed and she said that she could have done so if it hadn't been a lie on the part of the guy in order to trick her. However, then Liu He again approached the main character, took him by the chin and said that despite all this, she liked her brother's lies and he coped well. Then she handed the guy a scroll and said that it was a map of the entire cave of 10,000 ghosts, and now he could cultivate in any of the places marked on it, since negative energy is concentrated there the most. The main character already wanted to deny it, but the girl interrupted him and told him to take it when they give it, and added that she no longer needed this card. As she left, she added that she usually trains in a place in the middle of the map, and if the guy gets bored, he can come to her to watch. Then the girl said goodbye to Lulai and quickly flew away. The main character only managed to shout thanks after her. However, as soon as the girl disappeared from his field of vision, the guy exhaled with relief and thought that this cunning fox was finally gone, and he was calm. According to the guy, Liu He, under the pretext of returning the stones, wanted to gain his trust. And then she also added flirting with a small handout and an extremely dubious invitation before leaving, and also used her cunning tricks in between. Lu Lai decided that if he was an ordinary teenager, he would easily fall for it. However, unfortunately for her, the main character considered himself an unusual and confident man. And besides, the girl was absolutely not to his taste. To begin with, Lu Lai set himself the goal of getting to the astral spirit, and then do the rest of the business. After that, he sent me on my way, checking the map in parallel. After a while, the guy decided that he was already close to the Valley of 3 Stars, because it is located 360 kilometers to the southeast. Then he began to look around and saw a large mahogany tree. Lu Lai immediately realized that this was the same tree of buried souls. Instead of leaves, there were a lot of black ghosts on the root of the tree. The main character suggested that it was all negative Kai that the tree was able to pick up and accumulate over many years. At that moment, the guy wondered if he could absorb her with the help of the blood-devouring technique. Lu Lai was not sure that he would be able to carry out his plans, but it was still worth trying. The guy stretched out his hand with the palm open in front of him and began to try to absorb all the Kai from the tree. In the end, what was on it instead of leaves was sucked into the hole that was in the palm of the guy. And then, when the tree was left empty, the hole closed. The main character looked at the hand in surprise and could not understand why he had no progress after such a large absorption. However, at that moment he heard some kind of scream and, turning around, found that it was an evil spirit in a tree. He got right out of his trunk and rushed past the guy. The main character immediately turned in his direction and, putting his hand forward, shouted to the spirit that he did not even try to escape. In the next instant, a spirit in the form of a beast bit this very hand with its fangs. At that moment, Lu Lai realized that this monster is not called an astral spirit for nothing, because he is only a lower class, but already has the rudiments of intelligence, and besides, he knows better when to counterattack. Anyone else in the place of the main character would have lost his hand a long time ago, but it was Lu Lai who met this monster. He had the same protection from the Buddhist technique that prevented the monster from biting through his arm. Moreover, when the guy escaped from the teeth of the spirit, he was able to radiate from himself the strongest energy of golden color. Because of such an attack, the monster flew far away and decided that he should run. But Lu Lai was not going to give up so easily and rushed after him. He picked up a log and threw it towards the spirit, but it managed to dodge. Then he looked at his opponent. The main character was holding another huge log in his hand. His eyes were glowing red, and he was slowly approaching the beast. He ordered the spirit to stand and added that he was not afraid, because after all, Lu Lai is not a demon. The monster really stopped and began to look at the guy. In the next instant, the beast fell to the ground from fright and no longer tried to resist. Seeing this, Lu Lai realized that the monster was begging for mercy. Then the guy immediately calmed down and told the animal that in this case he should be a good girl and not move. The guy put the log next to him, picked up the very tower that the demon lord gave him, and decided that now was the time to try it out. After that, the main character threw the tower forward and it instantly increased in size, fell on top of the monster and covered it like a glass fly. Then Lu Lai pulled the tower towards him again. It shrank and fell into the hands of the guy. The main character was glad that everything turned out to be so easy, because he expected difficulties. Lu Lai began to admire the tower and thought that it would be great if it was possible to jump the astral spirit directly. But now it would be most convenient to exchange it for spiritual stones. And then the main character faced the question of who to sell this creature to. The guy thought about it and decided that he definitely would not sell the spirit to his master, and Liu He, apparently, has some ulterior motives, so you should not go to her lightly. Suddenly, Lu Lai came up with a brilliant idea to try to sell the spirit to his 8th brother, a speculator, and at the same time find out more about him. However, then the main character realized that he and his brother had just separated, and he had already caught the spirit in the cave, and this could arouse suspicion in Faye. As a result, the guy decided that it would be best for him to go back and retire at home for a month, and then you can already think about whether it's worth selling the spirit, because you need to be more restrained. After that, Lu Lai flew up and poisoned himself in the tower. However, the main character did not know that at this time he was still being watched by the same woman and a big man with a red beard. The second one told his girlfriend that this kid was doing well, because he was able to catch the astral spirit even during cultivation, and now the main character seems more and more interesting. In response to this, the girl asked the man about yours. Is it not better? Because men who are lucky, she likes more. On top of everything else, she noted that the guy runs in the same way as at one time the neighbor's old demon jumped out of the window when the girl's husband was returning home. These memories made her feel nostalgic and she smiled excitedly. Then the girl turned to the old demon and asked him if he did not agree with her. The man said nothing in response and only thought about whether he should stay away from this insidious widow, because he did not want to be eaten by her and forever remain a spirit in her stomach. A month later, the main character was sitting on the floor of his room and engaged in cultivation using stones. When the guy finished, a flash of golden and bright light radiated from him again, and then a notification from the system appeared. It said that the tempering of the main character's Kai reached the 3rd level. The Vajra technique and the technique of devouring blood and absorbing heaven were there, but the palm technique of tormenting unburied bones and the technique of the step of the devil ghost were already at the 4th. The guy picked up one stone and said with dissatisfaction that cultivation is expensive and Lu Lai's entire fortune goes to this, and he only reached the 3rd level of Kai hardening. Suddenly, the guy received a notification from the system that as a result of a breakthrough in strength, the palm of the torment of unburied bones believes in its power and challenges the Vajra technique. Lu Lai was surprised that the technicians could fight each other and began to observe what would happen next. In the end, the palm of the torment of unburied bones was defeated and retreated, so there was a regression of cultivation. In order to increase its strength, the technique decides to train hard and therefore its progress increases by 100%. Lu Lin expected that there was a concept of the victory of good over evil between the techniques, but fortunately for him, the regression is still compensated, and this could not but rejoice. The main character realized that his cultivation resources had run out and enough time had passed for him to try to sell the spirit. As a result, he went to Baijin Fei's apartment. It was a large palace with golden roofs and red walls. Going to the door, the guy knocked on it and the door was unlocked by a young and beautiful girl. She greeted the main character, calling him Mr. Lu, and asked him if he had any business with her master. The guy smiled and replied that there really was a case and he needed to discuss something. Then the girl invited him inside and informed him that the gentleman was waiting for him in the main hall. Lu Lai asked the girl if she knew he was coming. The girl smiled and replied that she did not know, but her master Fei has the ability to detect who is within a radius of several tens of kilometers from home, so he can meet guests in advance. The main character was not very pleased with this fact, because it meant that his 8th brother could scout everything on a very large area. The guy thought that his 8th brother was really not simple, and Lu was very lucky that he did not cross these places last time. When the main character was escorted to the main hall, he entered it and saw Baijin. The latter greeted him with joy and noted that they had not seen each other for a long time. The guy himself was sitting on the floor, and 2 beautiful girls were sitting very close to him. Fei looked at his brother with a sly squint and a smile and asked him if he had finally come to see these beauties.